Yo, what's up everybody? We're back here on Chess.com's YouTube channel. This is International Master Daniel Rensch, and today we're going to go over another mainline tournament opening that you need to know. And what I'd like to do today is continue with our coverage of the mainline Open Sicilians. As you can see here, we've set up the position once again after White's 2 knight f3, preparing to enter the Open Sicilian. And as you can see from the title of this video, we are here to learn the Sveshnikov Sicilian. The Sveshnikov is one of the most dynamic and popular Sicilians, especially over the last decade, we'll even say over the last 2 decades. It's an opening that's designed around achieving a very quick initiative, a bind on the queen side, and dynamic counterplay to compensate for black's positional weaknesses. The Sveshnikov always starts out with the move 2 knight to c6, and once again we're going to flip the board around so that you can see this opening from black's perspective, especially from the beginning here as we talk about the purpose and the idea behind black playing the Sveshnikov. After white plays d4 and we have c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, it should be noted that here, white cannot capture on c6 and play e5 this early, as black simply has this move queen a5 check, forking the king and pawn and winning material very quickly. However, as you saw in the dragon or accelerated dragon video, after knight to c3, if black were to play this move order and then try to go back into a dragon, that would no longer be possible, as now capturing an e5 would punish this move order and once again force the knight to a bad square or to sacrifice a pawn. Again, that information was covered in our dragon and accelerated dragon video lecture. You can check that out here in our chess openings playlist. But after knight to c3, the idea behind the Sveshnikov is a surprising move, an aggressive move, and a very double-edged move, something that as a chess coach I do not teach my students too early on in their career. That is the move e5. e5 is a move that obviously immediately gains a tempo on the knight, and in doing so, after the main line you're going to see here, black establishes a quick lead development, like I said, an initiative or a bind on the queen side, and long-term dynamic counterplay. However, the weakness behind the move e5 is clear. Black has significantly weakened the light squares in the center, particularly the d5 square, as white has an open file and access to the square already. And after natural play, you'll see that white is only able to increase his control over these squares. So why would black do this? Well, after e5, knight to b5, and d6, the move bishop to g5 is played in the main line. a6 is played. White has no other choice but to retreat the knight to a3. And after b5, we see that black has actually made more moves, per se, than white has, as white ended up wasting significant time with this knight, and now must waste time even a little bit further as the threat of b4 is coming, forking the ponies on the queen side. The point is that black has established early counterplay with this minority attack on the queen side, as he would like to do in every Sicilian, but in the Sveshnikov he does it as fast as any other variation of the Sicilian, probably including the Najdorf. And in doing so, he has established that he will get good counterplay and initiative on the queen side for the rest of the game. But coming back to the center, what black has done here is created an outpost square on d5 for white's knight. And as there is always associated with an outpost square, there is also a backward pawn on d6, a backward pawn being one that is left behind by his buddies and is therefore weak on any open file. So, white's 2 main advantages here in compensation for the lost time with the knights and black's bind on the queen side is access and control over the d5 square and potential to target this d6 pawn. As we flip the board again to look at white's perspective, white has 2 main moves here, and on move 9 is where we see the big difference in terms of white's approach philosophically against the Sveshnikov. One idea is to put the knight on d5 immediately. This move is obviously strong as it prevents the threat of b4, forking the 2 knights, puts a piece on a very strong square, and intends to increase control of the light squares for the rest of the game, either with moves like c4, trying to attack the pawns and bring either the knight or bishop to this square. In some cases, even the plan of c3, followed by using this square for the knight on a3, and therefore relocating it to a square that also increases control on the light squares, whether the knight ends up on e3 or b4. And the move knight to d5 also obviously exerts pressure in the black camp. After this move, black can play bishop to e7, and after bishop takes, as the threat on bishop e7 was to capture on d5 as the move bishop e7 unpinned the knight on f6. White trades it off, and black, in compensation for this weak knight for this weak square on d5 and therefore outpost by the white knight, has counterplay on the queen side already established and potentially the advantage of the bishop pair. You'll often see black castle, remove this bishop from f6, and try to play for f5, attacking in one direction of the board. The second line for white is to play the move bishop takes f6 immediately. This move is strong as black does not really have the option to capture with the queen, as after knight to d5 gaining a tempo and threatening knight to c7, the move queen to d8 is played. White can immediately strike in the center with c4 and continue with play on the queen side, and the time that black has lost with the queen, allowing this knight to come to d5 with tempo, is rather significant. So instead, black must capture with the pawn on f6. In this scenario, white will again follow with knight to d5 to avoid the fork of the knights on a3 and c3. And here black has further weaknesses. In addition to the d5 square and the d6 pawn, he now has doubled f-pawns. However, as we said, black in this Sveshnikov often has dynamic counterplay for the rest of the game. Black has the potential open g-file, the two bishops, which in open positions can be a dynamic advantage, and the early threat of f5. As you saw in the other variation, when white played knight to d5 and bishop e7, though black did not have the double pawns, it was going to take some time for him to remove this bishop to one square in order to get real counterplay. Whereas in this position, after bishop takes and g takes, despite the fact that black's position is certainly not a pretty picture in terms of pawn structure and squares, black is immediately threatening to put pressure on the center and will often do so as early as this move here, 10f5 being one of the main lines in the Sveshnikov. Again, in summary, the move e5 is a risk in that it weakens black's center, creating positionally long-term problems on the light squares. However, by gaining tempos on the knight and eventually expanding quickly on the queen side, black achieves dynamic compensation in the form of counterplay on the queen side, quick initiative, and eventual compensation of things such as the bishop pair and play on the king side with a break of f5. One thing we'd like to note quickly is that in the Najdorf, an opening that was already covered here in our chess openings playlist, black will also try for this e5 structure. You might even call it a Najdorf/Sveshnikov structure, even though it's not the Sveshnikov opening. However, the reason why black does not typically play this move immediately, and only does so after a6 in the Najdorf, is because e5 would once again significantly weaken the light squares, and in this case, white would have the intermezzo, the in-between move option, to give check and trade off black's light squared bishop, thus increasing white's pressure potentially on the light squares. Here, even a retreat of the knight to a more passive square like f3 or b3 would be good enough for white to maintain an advantage, as these light squares are significantly weak for the rest of the game, and black does not have the early counterplay coming. On that note, we flip back to the Sveshnikov and recognize the fact that when black plays e5 early here, white must play the move knight to b5 in order to put pressure on d6, as a passive retreat in this position that was possible in the Najdorf no longer works here because black's accelerated development would allow a pin on the knight, immediately threatening to take the e4 pawn. And when you follow that with threats such as d5, once again, taking advantage of black's quick development to increase pressure on the center, we like black's chances. One of the reasons why, in fact, the main reason why, white must play knight d to b5 right away to put pressure on this square, preventing moves such as developments with the bishop because of the check. Thank you for watching this video lecture on the Sveshnikov. Hope you're enjoying our YouTube channel, having a little party town in your head about all these free opening lectures you're getting. So you stay in party town and you stay classy. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on Chess.com.